Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well, and I've just come off the back of putting together some very time-consuming videos that have taken a lot of my energy, and am just beginning the process of editing together the second part of my little album documentary, so that will take a while. And for that reason, I was just thinking of putting together one of the most casual videos I could possibly make, and go through my entire vinyl collection gradually in multiple parts. So this will probably end up being maybe 6 or 7, chunks of about half a cube here. This video going over the first 20 odd records alphabetically, and I'll try and do this in just roughly one take, which I haven't really tried before, so do forgive me if I stumble a little ever, because I'm not the greatest person at stringing together a sentence on the spot. Hey, come closer. So vinyl is essentially what I spend virtually all of my money on at this point. I used to collect CDs, which are over on the shelf there, but I kind of moved on to vinyl with its, bigger format, more pretty art, and I guess just the general feeling of warmth. People often talk about that analog sound, even though I consider that more of a feeling than something you can actually hear. I just love the format. I love how big and physical it is. Just properly owning the music rather than just borrowing it off the internet. I go charity shopping and looking in secondhand record shops all the time, so I'd say maybe half of these records are secondhand or given to me by relatives. I've often had people just sort of give things a new home that have been lying around in their attics, which is very lucky. I've got some very good music from my mum and dad and grandpa's and uncle's collections. But there's also a lot of new things here and a lot of very rare items, so I'm looking forward to getting into that. So for anyone interested, this here's an IKEA Kallax shelf. I use the Audio-Technica LP120 turntable with the default cartridge, although I'm considering upgrading to an Autophon 2M Red. And this amp here is a NAD 3020i, which I got second hand and works very nicely. Bit of a vintage bit of gear there. And my speakers are the Wharfdale Diamond 9.1, although I've also got plugged in at the same time some, I think they're called LTAX Concept 200 floor standing speakers, which aren't as high quality, but we literally found them lying in a skip and somehow they work, which is amazing. And they add a bit of oomph, a bit of bass to the music. So anyway, let's get into the first chunk of records here. So starting off alphabetically in the numbers here, we have Gorgeous by 808 State, which has one of the cheesiest album covers I've ever seen in my entire life, and is also some pretty cheesy music, but an absolute ton of fun to listen to, in my opinion, if you're a fan of sort of early 90s electronic music. You'll notice, by the way, a lot of this collection is electronic music, because it's kind of the first genre I really got into, and still one of my, one of the biggest parts of my listening. So this isn't really my favourite 808 State album. That would have to go to Don Solaris or 90. Also would love to get XL at some point. They've got some brilliant stuff. But I just, as I said, have a ton of fun putting this on nonetheless. Got a bit of acid house on here, a bit of techno, some very poppy stuff as well. This actually also comes with, I guess, a 12-inch EP here, which has got another 5 tracks on it. Next 808 State record I have is just this little 12-inch of Lift and Open Your Mind. Lift is this really bizarre yet kind of fascinating and groovy little piece that sounds a little bit like sort of elevator music, but also goes hard. Can't remember too much about the B-side on here, but yeah, anyway, that's a cool little thing. And my final 808 State record, this is a very cool one, Transmission Suite, the most recent 808 State album. Not really one of my favourite records of theirs, although I do enjoy its more, acid-like kind of style. Probably a bit more into their more fun and upbeat and chaotic stuff, but I enjoy this quite a bit nonetheless. However, this is taking a while to come off, a very special record here, because I went to their show at Banquet Records, and both members of the band signed the back of the record, and there's a really cool photo of me with them that they uploaded to Instagram when I was very little, which was absolutely surreal at the time. This sort of comes in a kind of hardcover sleeve, and then there's this gatefold, double LP, by the way. Cool photo of this massive studio they were working in. Not the most exciting color scheme of all time, obviously, but yeah, definitely holding on to this one because of the signatures. And I haven't mentioned, tragically, Andy Barker from 808 State passed away last year, which was a big shock and pretty devastating given I met him in real life. Sorry to put such a downer into this video, but I'm very honoured to have met him and will treasure this record for a very long time. Next up I have 858, which is the side project from Paul Hartnell of Orbital. I have absolutely masses of Orbital records, but I'll get to that later. This is a pretty damn solid album. Featuring Cillian Murphy, of all people, doing sort of spoken word on a lot of these tracks. Robert Smith from The Cure, The Unthanks. There's kind of very star-studded album somehow. I don't know how he managed to get all of these people on here, but yeah, the features are amazing. Lots of these songs slap. I'm just a big Orbital fanboy, so I was gonna enjoy this whatever it was. Anyway, I kind of love this contrast of like grey and sort of ultra bright, almost fluorescent blue. I'm not sure why it works so well, it just does. Double LP here, some nice glossy inner sleeves with Paul Hartnell Lost in Thought on there. Pretty niche little record here, but definitely enjoy a good deal. Anyway, now for something completely different, Adam and the Ants, Kings of the Wild Frontier. This is one of the few records in my collection which I actually somehow managed to find given away completely free in a second-hand shop near to me. This is a very popular album to find absolutely free. I'm not, like, enormously into it. I gave it one listen and kind of just enjoyed the hits on here, but some very fun and zany essential tracks on here. It kind of makes sense why it was being given away now. Forgot this inner sleeve was entirely split and the record isn't in like the best condition you've ever seen, also missing this 12-page catalogue it's advertising on the front, sadly. But yeah, cool stuff. Moving on from there, I have some records from the French band Air. French band as specified on the cover of Moon Safari here. Not 100% sure why they felt the need to add that in there. I absolutely adore this record. It's probably one of the most played albums in my collection. Just this gorgeous soundscape of like dream pop, electronica, jazz music. Very like easy to get into for pretty much anyone, and it sends chills up my spine with just how gorgeous so many of these tracks are. In my opinion, probably one of the most essential albums of the 1990s. It is just that good. Opening with La Femme d'Argent, a 7-minute spacey jazz epic. Kelly Watch the Stars. Oh my god, those pianos are like ascending into the night sky. Talisman. Remember, by the way, very, very underrated. Short but sweet, gorgeous bit of pop music there. Just like practically a 10 out of 10 from front to back, and probably one of the best sounding records in my entire collection. This is on 180 gram audiophile vinyl, a buzzword that's chucked around a lot, but it is very deserved here. And then I just have one more little 12-inch single from them of Alpha Beta Gaga, which is not one of my favourite tracks of theirs, but it's a nice little thing to have. I picked this up for next to nothing. Would like to get 10,000 Hertz Legend as well, because that's probably my second favourite album of theirs overall, for a very different reason. But anyway, moving on. The Alan Parsons Project, 70s prog rock outfit. This is iRobot, my favourite album of theirs, sort of a sci-fi concept epic, I guess, for most of it. There's some more standard 70s pop rock cuts which don't hit quite as hard, but the actual stuff that sticks to this robot sci-fi concept is absolutely phenomenal. Sounds fantastic even on this sort of standard pressing. I can only imagine what the Mo-Fi one is like. My god. Very 70s artwork on here, this big gatefold. Wonder what's going on here. I like the look of these cool sort of tube escalator things. Alan Parsons himself on the inside of the gatefold there with some lyrics and slightly pretentious poetry on the inside there, because of course it's a prog rock album. What were you expecting? Would highly recommend. Same goes for the Turn of a Friendly card, which is my second favourite Alan Parsons Project album. Pretty common opinion on there, bit of a cold take. Best part of this record has got to be the enormous Turn of a Friendly card suite on the second side. Sort of 20 minutes, I guess, just continuously flowing into each other. 5 parts of that. You might be more into this than iRobot. Also some essential stuff. Next up we have Big Science by Laurie Anderson, which is probably one of my favourite experimental pop albums of the 1980s. Not quite my favourite because we do have Kate Bush, but this is just absolutely fantastic. Very unconventional production on here. Apparently she had a kind of electric violin where you had, like, I'm pretty sure there was like tape on the bow or something, and you'd kind of drag your arm along and it would like play what was recorded onto the tape or something like that. At least that's what my dad's told me. But don't underestimate how like out there this album is. A lot of spoken word vocals, sort of minimalist influence, some very dissonant saxophone work. You probably known best for the track Oh Superman, which is 8 minutes long, has this sort of consistent vocal sound throughout, but somehow is like absolutely beautiful, to me at least. There's this one lyric on there that just says, and when love is gone there's always justice, and when justice is gone there's always force, and when force is gone there's always mum. That resonates with me. Really fascinating avant-garde stuff. Sadly, there is a reason why my hand is on the front of the record. Yes, tragic. This is what happens when you leave a big fat sticker on your record, give it into a secondhand shop, and I have to try and peel it off. Very, very depressing. But anyway, fantastic album. Next up, something very, very different, once more. Ichiko Aoba, Windswept Aiden. If you saw my best albums of 2020 video, this was, I think, at number 4, probably move it up to at least number 3 or 2 now. This has really grown on me even more. Just one of the most gorgeous pieces of folk influenced music I've ever heard. Of course, Ichiko Aoba is from Japan. I saw her live quite recently, and that was a really beautiful experience. This is an album inspired by this imaginary concept of an island. There's a whole kind of story that goes with it, which I have in a little book that's up on my shelf there, which he kindly signed for me. A lot of sounds of like the sea and of bells and highly evocative imagery when I listen to this, and it just takes me to another place in my mind. This actually wasn't available for a very long time on anything other than digital or CD, so I was massively excited when they announced the vinyl pressing, and the artwork on here is one of my favourite things about it. This big gatefold image of Ichiko underwater, and the track listing there. Even bigger image on the inside here of her falling downwards, just drifting. Lovely, lovely photography there. And also comes with this little lyric booklet, which is very, very helpful, because I've kind of had to search for unofficial English translations online, but this actually has the entire thing translated. This is also one of, I think, only 2 albums in my collection which has printing on the inside of the sleeve, actually where the records go, which is a pretty nerdy thing to obsess over, but it adds this extra feeling of immersion in the artwork, I guess. What am I saying? I am such a massive vinyl geek, I apologize. But yeah, just one of the most beautiful albums of the past decade, in my opinion. Full stop. Next up, we have some records from Aphex Twin, one of the best electronic artists to ever walk this earth, in my humble opinion. Very experimental stuff a lot of the time, but this LP here, Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92, is probably his most accessible piece of work to date. Very inspirational album to me, because if this title is correct, he started work on this music when he was 14, younger than me. So yeah, I've got a lot to compete with. But anyway, it's not actually entirely ambient music. It's kind of, a lot of it's ambient house, so does have percussion, but has this sort of airy and spacey, reverb-heavy atmosphere. X-Tau is such a gorgeous opener. Thar, I've listened to countless times. 9-minute ambient piece that makes me feel like I'm sort of in some busy train station or something. Helios Fan, oh my god, one of the best tracks Aphex Twin has ever put together. Some slightly more aggressive acid house kind of stuff on here that I'm not quite as into but still enjoy. Love this just simple but bold design on the front here, the way you've got these kind of shiny silver letters on the front and the back. Gatefold might have been nice, but I'm perfectly fine with this kind of just 2 discs of 180 gram, lovely, chunky, dummy, thick, heavyweight vinyl inside there. Pretty recent repress. The original goes for utterly insane money, so not too fussed about that. Anyway, the one other Aphex Twin album I currently have, well, not album actually, this is an EP, is Window Liquor, the boob record. Occasionally just pull this out of my record collection just to scare off people I have in the house. Slightly disturbing, but actually, like, really well photoshopped image here, or however it was put together. I'm not sure how they did that. It is absolutely seamless. Maybe he does actually look like this in real life. Window Liquor is probably one of my favourite Aphex Twin pieces. Absolutely gotta love that heavy noise section toward the end. Goes on all sorts of twists and turns. This has on the B-side a track whose title is literally just this most ridiculously long mathematical formula. And then Nanu, which is one of the softest pieces of music he's ever put together. Just this subtle music box kind of sound. By the way, there are multiple Aphex Twin albums that I would absolutely love to own but have never been repressed and go for hundreds and hundreds of pounds, because I'm pretty sure he like destroyed the original master tapes. So that's Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, probably one of my biggest holy grails of vinyl that I'm searching for. And Drux is this big 4 LP box set that's just so expensive. Probably would be out of my mind if I even tried to buy that. Aphex Twin, undisputed genius, cannot recommend enough. Moving on from there, I have The Art of Noise with Who's Afraid of the Art of Noise. A really weird but strangely appealing bit of electronic music from the 1980s. This band has Ann Dudley and Trevor Horn from the Buggles, if you saw I reviewed their album. Anyway, I found this in a charity shop, which is one of my best finds, given pretty much all you see most of the time in the charity shops is like literally just Engelbert Humperdinck and Barry Manilow, and it gets pretty tedious, but occasionally you get a little gem like this. This cost me about £3 or so. Very good condition. Maybe not for everyone, because it actually is very out there a lot of the time, very sampler heavy, actually kind of heavy and aggressive at a lot of points, but really weird and fascinating stuff. Would recommend to anyone interested in old electronic oddities and sample-based music. But speaking of sample-based music, the best sample-based band of all time, in my humble opinion. This is Since I Left You by the Avalanches, which I considered for a long time my favourite album ever made, so naturally it was one of the first records I bought. This is a recent double LP reissue. By the way, this has some of my favourite album artwork ever made. My lock screen on my phone. Just this inside of the gatefold is so beautiful to look at. I don't think I can even begin to put into words how I feel about this album. Just an hour-long odyssey of samples from all across musical history that is just the most utter blast from front to back. So many emotions that I feel going through this, you know, nostalgia, melancholy, and just pure joy created from the hundreds and hundreds of samples they used on this. Just one of the most unbelievable feats of music ever, in my opinion. I cannot sell this to you enough. My love for this band goes beyond words and also beyond the sanity of being able to have just one copy of their albums. Because I also had to go and get this massive deluxe 4LP behemoth that came out recently. Just could not resist. Absolutely enormous gatefold here, folding out into 4 different segments, of course, for the 4 discs. Rather intrigued by what they did with the artwork here, just kind of doing a weird splash of colour on top. It's a bit of a strange artistic decision, but it does kind of work. So this is the main album on 2 discs, plus another 2 discs of a ton of remixes from some pretty massive names. You've got Cornelius, Stereo Lab, MF Doom, Leon Vinehall. Love tons of the artists who played around with their stuff. Of course, you're getting into slightly dodgy territory when you're trying to kind of fiddle around with one of my favourite records ever made, and some of the remixes on here don't really hit, but, you know, of course, remix albums are always a little bit hit and miss. But anyway, beautiful, beautiful package here. Sounds better than my other pressing there. Almost would want to get rid of my first copy of the album that I bought, but it has a lot of kind of sentimental value to me, so I'm holding on to it. Also got a massive poster which came with it, which is up on my wall. Anyway, the second Avalanches album I also have, obviously. This is Wildflower, which was released an entire 16 years after Since I Left You, which is just a ridiculously big gap, but makes sense given how unbelievably constructed all of their music is, and this follow-up absolutely did not disappoint. Far more of a sort of 60s psychedelia vibe, which you can definitely see on the artwork here. This is the deluxe LP version, so you've got a big fold-out gatefold here, with a guy whose style I have basically stolen here. This album aesthetic was the main inspiration for this denim jacket I've got here. You can see a little Avalanches patch as well. So, yeah, probably not quite on the same level as Since I Left You in my opinion, but also some fantastic stuff which I've listened to a ridiculous number of times. Got some extra artwork from the singles on here. This is just on the standard black double LP, but it did come with a nice little CD of the album as an extra, and a cool poster which I've got up above my bed. I do also have the third Avalanches album, which came out in 2020, and I marked as my favourite album of 2020. Maybe my least favourite Avalanches album. That's literally not saying anything, given they're one of my absolute favourite bands of all time. Brings in some more influence from R&B and hip-hop and a bit of indie rock, but is really just the Avalanches. Still very sample-based, but uses more features. Who have you got on here? You've got Rivers Cuomo, Sampa the Great, Tricky, Denzel Curry, Johnny Marr, Vashti Bunyan, Mick Jones. One of the most beautiful looking packages in my whole vinyl collection. They just decided to go absolutely above and beyond with this spacey looking packaging. Gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. Came with a big poster of this planet here, which I've got up on my wall next to the keyboard. All of my Avalanches albums came with posters, which is very nice. I can turn this into an Avalanches room. My first coloured record of this whole alphabetical collection. This is apparently, in their words, a double mint and electric blue record. I don't really see the blue, it's just kind of darker, vaguely bluish green within a lighter green, but I still think it looks gorgeous. I could not just limit myself to one copy of the album again, and I have another copy of We Will Always Love You, as well as a second copy of Since I Left You. So it's pretty hilarious that even though the band only have 3 albums, I have 5 LPs of theirs. But anyway, I had a pretty special reason to buy this second copy of the album. See, not only is it this lovely, lovely picture disc edition, 4 different spectrogram images. This also came with a signed inner sleeve, like a second inner sleeve that came sort of separate, waiting to be put up on my wall. Not many people actually got this little cute heart drawing there, so I was probably one of the first people to order it. Even though I don't really play the picture disc, because, you know, kind of slightly lower sound quality, and I've decided I've got one for playing and one to keep in pristine condition. Actually, the rarest record we've seen so far goes for about £70 on Discogs occasionally. So, beautiful, beautiful item to own. Owning records as collectibles and pieces of art is one of the absolute biggest draws, in my opinion. So yeah, Avalanches. Love them, love them. Moving on to someone I absolutely have listened to many times. This is Björk, who is, in my opinion, kind of one of the greatest artists ever to live in music. She is just an absolute genius and extraordinary musician and singer. I have my 2 favourite albums of hers. This is Homogenic, her 1997 third album, I believe. The production on here is absolutely cutting edge for the time that it was made in. So dramatic and sweeping, really makes me think of cinematic, epic Icelandic landscapes, particularly on tracks like Bachelorette, with their absolutely gorgeous, expansive string sections, but you've also got sort of skittering electronics on Hunter and all neon-like. Actually pretty kind of distorted, out there, and aggressive a lot of the time. She has this brilliant ability to go from, like, ethereal beauty to just pure kind of raw rage. Now that I talk about it, probably one of my favourite albums of all time. This just comes on 1 disc of vinyl, which strangely sort of goes in the top. Kind of shiny silver cover here. Absolutely essential album to own for anyone. But speaking of essential Björk albums, Vespertine, which I believe is her 4th record, I might love this even more than Homogenic, but it does have a slightly different appeal. This is just one of the most utterly otherworldly and angelic albums ever made, and one of the best pressings in my collection, probably. Her voice just sounds so kind of close and intimate. It's probably the way the album is produced as well, but it really feels like she's like in the room with me when I listen to this. And when it all opens up on a track like It's Not Up to You or Undo, with these massive like choirs and orchestration, it's just an unbelievable feat of artistry. I can't decide which of her albums I like more out of these 2, but this is also probably one of my favourite albums of all time, maybe even top 20. You've got this lovely little kind of hand-drawn aesthetic here with the swan on the back and this strange massive shapes on the inside of the gatefold, also on the inner sleeves too. Love it, love it. Practically a 10 out of 10 album, both of these really. And now skipping forward a whole 20 years to the first record, maybe the only record in my collection currently that came out this year. Black Country New Road, Ants From Up There. This is like easily my favourite album of the year so far. I've only listened to it twice, but each time was just an absolute experience. This is even better than their first album, which still made it into my top 10 of albums from 2021. Blew my mind on first listen. They've been labelled as a post-punk band in the past, but I think this album kind of transcends genre, really. You've got a string section, a brass section, a lot of minimalist influence. There were 2 different coloured versions of the album, but I ended up going for this special 4 LP box set, which was amazingly cheap, only £25 plus postage from their Bandcamp. The main album on 2 different discs, another 2 discs, of a whole performance live from the Queen Elizabeth Hall in the South Bank Centre. I haven't actually been through this yet. I see that it's got a couple of tracks from this new album, but also the entire first record in full, which is, like, absolutely amazing to get along with the main album for literally, like, the same price as just Ants From Up There on coloured vinyl. Also have a full lyric booklet, which also comes with some nice little photos and stuff. And 4 different 12-inch art prints. Phenomenal record, favourite of 2022 so far, and an absolutely lovely bit of presentation here. Not many records left now, but actually the next band, coincidentally, also has black in their name and are kind of linked to the same sort of scene of post-punk revival. I am, of course, talking about Black Midi and their absolutely impeccable 2021 second album, Cavalcade, the best live show I've ever been to. This album is just so utterly psychotic, gloriously over the top and chaotic in every single way, and I love every second of it. When I put this on my system, it literally just threatens to destroy all of the technology I have. It hits so hard. You can see other videos for more of my thoughts on this album, but anyway, the vinyl here, very interesting sort of vertical gatefold artwork, crazy mishmash of all sorts of weird, screwed up digital colours, and on the inside of the gatefold there's another great digital mass alongside all of the lyrics from the album, so that's very neat. Now, there was a more expensive picture disc edition. This is just a pretty standard 180-gram black version, but there was a really fascinating little gimmick they did with this edition of the record, which is they held a vote for a big selection of songs. People were allowed to vote which song they wanted Black Midi to cover, and released these little flexi discs. For some reason, I'm not sure where I put it, but the one I ended up with was just the general, like, UK independent record shop edition, with a cover of course, the most natural thing for Black Midi to do a cover of, Love Story by Taylor Swift. We do in fact live in a timeline where there is a Black Midi version of Love Story, so yeah, it slaps just as hard as you'd expect it to. Anyway, moving on from there, we have an album from Black Sabbath, Sabotage. This isn't my favourite Black Sabbath album. That would have to go to probably Paranoid, even though I haven't actually made it through the whole discography. They're just obviously a classic, very early metal band. Absolute icons, really. I really ought to give this one another listen. I think I only listened to it once ages ago, but this was given to me by, I think, my uncle. I actually looked this up on Discogs, and somehow this is worth about £45 at the moment, being, I'm pretty sure, the first pressing, and it's in very good condition here, so that's actually a really amazing item to have just been given for absolutely free. So very lucky to have this, and we'll definitely give it another listen very soon. Getting into the final few records for today's video, this is Black Sands by Bonobo, which is actually the first album I ever bought on vinyl, believe it or not. Found this for, I think, £16 in Banquet Records, which is actually a pretty good deal. But this is definitely my favourite Bonobo album. It is electronic music, there's a lot of synth work here, but so much of it is just completely jazz instrumentation. It's just a beautiful fusion of genres, traverses the worlds of jazz and electronica completely effortlessly. Such an easy thing to just put on in the background whatever mood I'm in, or sit down and give it a close listen, because there's a pretty unbelievable level of detail in the production here. If you haven't given this a listen, I absolutely highly recommend checking it out. And the last artist I'm going to show you in my collection in this video is none other than Mr. David Bowie himself. Now, I really have been meaning to give the full Bowie discography a listen for a very long time now. I just haven't got around to getting into it somehow. But I do have 3 Bowie records, 2 LPs and a 12-inch. One of them I found for myself at a car boot sale, which is Young Americans. This was somehow only £3. Now, the sleeve is like, it's got some ring wear and a few marks, and the vinyl isn't in perfect condition, but that's still like an outrageously cheap deal for something that goes for at least kind of 6 or 7 times that. Now, when I've gone through the full discography, I don't know if this is going to be one of my absolute favorites of his, and I don't think it's one of his like absolute classic albums, but of course Bowie was an absolute musical genius. That's pretty undisputed. Top-notch songwriting as ever, and of course most Bowie albums are kind of considered essential listening, so yeah, I'm very glad to have that one. And I believe this came from my dad. This is Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, which I kind of feel like is a slightly underrated album of his. Very unique, a little bit quirky, a little bit wacky kind of 80s art rock of his. It's some pretty like heavy and hard-hitting stuff a lot of the time, and is a really fascinating listen. And finally, I also have the 12-inch single of Let's Dance, which is just an absolute synth pop banger. You have to hear this track. It's got Nile Rodgers on it, brilliantly produced, sticks in your head, and the B-side Cat People is nice as well. So yeah, this was another ridiculously cheap find for £2 at the same car boot sale, so that was a very good day of vinyl finding. But yeah, David Bowie, classic stuff. So that is all the vinyl nerdery we have time for today. I hope you've enjoyed. Have had to put a few more cuts in than expected. I'm not the best person at just talking straight to the camera, completely improvised. Stay tuned for both the second part of this series and the second part of my album documentary series. But for now, thanks for watching.